In this video, I try to explain to you the pros and cons of quality versus quantity in wargaming. We've all heard the term about quantity versus quality. There's a lot of different kind of colloquialisms and sayings between, quantity is a quality, it's all its own, and just, all kinds of stuff like that. Sometimes they're talking about strategy in wargaming. Sometimes they're talking about, like, if I just have a bunch of terrible units, I can swamp your fewer, better units. Stuff like that, But what I'm talking about more is having something more to do with the hobby, the painting, the building, and things like that, and how quantity and quality are different, and a personal choice basically kind of different for nearly everyone. One of the most important things to understand about the quality and quantity is that both are subjective. To some people, having to paint 5 models that are all the same looking, they're all the same type of soldier, is unimaginable. Just being able that many 5 people, I mean, that's a lot, And then there are other folks to whom a small unit of orcs is 60, and they're like, oh, well, that's only a small unit. I'll get through these pretty quickly. So, under quantity, again, subjective, and quality even more so. With quantity, at least you can say this number is smaller than that number. With quality, there are people that will tell you that this quality of paint job is better than that quality, but really those things can be kind of a bit, I don't want to say mutually exclusive, but they can definitely be personal preference. I've met wargamers in the past who look at a model that has got, simple base colors and then a wash, and they will say that's wasted time. That amount of quality, again, being subjective, is too much. That's just not, it's not worth it. There's no reason that you should bother to put the wash on you because, they're just models and you're going to see them from 6 feet away, or all these other things that we always hear when people talk about what's a tabletop quality model and what's above tabletop quality. Other people will look at a model that is got 3 layers of highlights and say, well, I mean, you kind of stopped at 3 layers of highlights. So it's a personal preference. I have a personal preference that I try to attain when I'm painting things, but because of quantity, sometimes I dial it back. Very frequently, what I try to do is try to find efficiencies, something that I can do to make it so that I can paint more models quickly to a quality that I prefer. But a lot of times it comes down to just a situation of, if there's a whole bunch of them, I'm going to try to dial things back a little bit and understand that not everyone can be a masterpiece. I have 80 plague troopers from Mantic that I bought after talking about the Halloween kind of zombie apocalypse type of campaign thing that I would do, the special event that I'd like to do for next year's Halloween. I talked about a video about that just a month back or so. Pachow. And in that, I talked about having a whole bunch of one type of model. So I went and bought a whole bunch of these cool sci-fi kind of plague zombies. They sort of look like a zombie Imperial Guard, and I want to paint them. But I understand that 80 is a lot of models, specifically for me, talking subjectively, and so I'm going to have to figure out what the quality is that I'm going to be happy with, again, subjectively. And it becomes a balance between, in many situations, quantity and quality. Now, getting back to quantity, generally the games themselves dictate the number of models that you're going to need in that game. If you decide to play a historical game, huge rank and flank kind of situation, maybe it's American Civil War, maybe it's Napoleonics, whatever, you are going to be seeing probably a whole bunch of models on the table. And at that point, then you have to make the decision to keep sane that not every single one of them is going to be, touched by perfection. You're going to have to kind of come up with an assembly line situation, and that's fine. But again, like I was saying before, there are other people who are looking at games that are considered to be skirmish games where maybe they have 20 models and saying, no, that's not for me. That's way too many models. I don't want to do that. As I've been playing and kind of going through and growing as a hobbyist, I have been finding myself drawn more and more to skirmish-style games, games that use fewer and fewer models, frankly. Games like Malifaux, games like, it's kind of not really in print anymore, but Mercs. Mercs had a limit where every army was 5 models, and that was it. That was kind of cool. Games like Kill Team, games like Warcry, those types of skirmish-style games, for me, give me this great benefit that I love, because it's not so many models to have to deal with and carry around. The games have a tendency to go quicker, and that's part of the quantity thing. But then because of the lower quantity, I can then focus more on what's interesting to me, which is the quantity. Or, sorry, I think I got all that backwards. Lower quantity, higher quality. They should have made those words maybe just slightly more different, like had one start with a B or something. Anyway, the concept is that, when you play a skirmish game, and this is probably one of the reasons why skirmish games are becoming so popular, is then when you play that, you can spend more time, if you're interested, to raise the quality of your paint. You can spend more time on individual models because maybe your army is only 6 models. My Death Guard forces for Kill Team, 6 models. And I got to spend a bunch of time on them, but not too much time. That's another benefit sometimes to making that difference between quantity and quality, because most of us don't just play one game or have one army, especially when we're dealing with skirmish-style games. I currently have 6 painted Kill Team armies because it's so much easier to get through them quickly. I can take still a pretty decent level of quality, but because of the lower quantity, I can get that group done, and then I can move on to another one. I've said it before a bunch of times in different videos. It's like a buffet. I can do a little bit of this and a little bit of that and kind of keep moving. And for me, that's what interests me in currently the hobby. But for many, the spectacle of the quantity is really the big deal. When you see humongous, kind of like I mentioned earlier, historical armies, giant blocks of troops being moved around, or even slightly smaller than that, getting into rank and flank style games like Kings of War from Mantic, or the Song of Ice and Fire, which is based off the Game of Thrones was based off of those books, whatever. But, that kind of, those are still smallish armies, but there's a bunch of models on each stand. And there are levels, obviously. When you go hardcore Napoleonics, let's say, that can be a ton of models. Admittedly, they are frequently also smaller, so that's also kind of a different type of quantity because it's physically less space and less mass, although the same, still a high number of models. So trying to determine whether you're really into the concept of like, I love a giant conglomeration of models on the battlefield, and I think that looks amazing. When you take that into your brain and you decide that's the type of game that you want to play as a beginner player getting into wargaming, the first thing that you need to understand when you do make that decision that quantity needs to be up here, you need to understand that if you don't bring quality down a bit, you're going to have a bad time. You'll probably never get your army done. So it becomes very important for you to understand within your own mind, do I prefer quantity versus quality? Just within a big game like Warhammer 40,000, there are Tyranid armies, there are Orc armies, and there are Imperial Guard armies. All of these armies are considered to be Horde-style armies. They generally field, in some situations, a couple hundred models, depending on how big of a game you're playing. Whereas a game, if you're playing somebody like, I don't know, Grey Knights or Imperial Knights, you're dealing with a much, much smaller number of models. They're very elite. You could spend a lot more time on them if you want to, but it depends on your play style in that situation. And if that's the thing that's the most important to you, even more so than being able to spend a bunch of time per model, then that's the way to go. Definitely look for games that allow you to play a lot of models. Let's say you've got a situation where you've got, and it also depends a little bit upon what's being played in your local area. If your local area is well known for Flames of War and Malifaux, those are two, as far as quantity is concerned, wildly different games. In Flames of War, you can have, depending on the army, a lot of tanks, or if you go Soviets, a lot of troops. And the troops are very tiny, but you still have to kind of paint them. You're not painting eyes because they're this big, but you're still spending a decent amount of time on them. So understanding that if you don't know whether you like big games or small games, then you have to kind of fall back and say, well, but how would I rather paint? Would I rather paint very quickly, assembly line, try to get stuff to a certain level and get it out the door because there's so much to get out the door? Or do I want to try to spend a little bit more time and figure out, some techniques and some blending and some shading and highlighting and things like that? If you do, you might want to lean a little bit more towards the skirmish games. So it might sound a bit complicated to a newer person getting into wargaming, but it really comes down to, in my opinion, one of two things. Do you love to see big armies, or do you love to paint and spend a good amount of time per model? If you do, you could sit and spend tons and tons of hours on every single model of your entire Tyranid army, of which there are 200 models, but you'll probably never get a game in with your painted army. And that's really the focus of, generally, if you're going to sit down and play a war game and you love to see that out on the table, that kind of stuff, then you kind of want to get it painted. So if that's a situation where I really, really, really want to spend a lot of time and do really amazing work on each model on an individual basis, I would tell you to go to a skirmish game. Look towards the quality versus the quantity. But if you love the spectacle of having all of your models on the table taking up so much space and all of the moving around and everything like that, in that situation, then you're definitely going to want to go quantity, and then you're going to have to understand that you need to kind of lower your expectations on every single model as far as painting. Come up with efficiencies, look for ways you can cut corners, and understand that they're just going to look really great when they're all on the table by themselves, in a group, but when you look at them by themselves, they may not look quite as good. So hopefully that'll help you understand kind of what type of game you might want to try to play, or how you want to sort of balance the game that you've already chosen in your head. If you've picked a game, and in almost every type of miniature game, there are always armies that have a lot of weaker units, and there are other armies that have fewer, stronger units. Depending on how your hobby portion is, you may want to go one way, and depending about how much you enjoy pushing around tons of models and seeing all that stuff, you might want to go the other way. But understanding that, talking to some friends who are already playing, or people in your local area, talking to your store owner and asking questions, can help you to start to buy the right models for either quantity or quality, so that you don't kind of end up with an army that you don't like and that you kind of can't handle.